Welcome to Mr. American Movies. A 6-year-old boy witnesses his family's annihilation, is rescued by a soldier, and embarks on a journey that transforms him into Russia's youngest hero. Today, we're recapping the 2019 film Soldier Boy. The story unfolds in the 1940s, during the throes of World War II. We find Alishka perched in a tree, observing the natural world, while his mother does laundry by the river. His older brother, Petya, is fishing nearby. Suddenly, a plane appears and begins strafing them. His mother urges the boys to hide, but Alishka, with surprising bravery, uses his slingshot to bring down the aircraft. When he turns to find his mother and brother, they are nowhere to be seen. This scene cuts to Alishka being roused by a knock at the door. He mistakenly believes it's his mother, but instead, it's his Aunt Anisia. Anisia is clearly frightened and insists that he pack his belongings immediately. They must leave. She explains that his mother and brother are dead, and if the soldiers discover he's her nephew, he'll be killed too. Her plan is to take him and present him as her own son. However, before they can escape, German soldiers storm the house. Anisia helps Alishka flee through a window, but she herself is shot. Terrified, the boy runs into the forest, clinging to the hope that his mother will find him, completely unaware of the trials that lie ahead. Several hours pass, and Alishka is left to fend for himself. While drinking water from a riverbank, he's startled by the arrival of soldiers. Traumatized by recent events, he desperately seeks a hiding place. He squeezes himself between the roots of a large tree, only to encounter a snake. Paralyzed with fear, he forces himself to remain silent. The terror of sharing his family's fate eclipses even his fear of the serpent. The soldiers, meanwhile, build a fire and take a break. After eating, they extinguish the fire and depart. Finally, Alishka manages to escape the snake's vicinity. Driven by hunger, he picks up one of the discarded cans left behind by the soldiers, hoping to find some scraps of food. Days turn into a week, and the boy becomes so weak that he can barely walk. He manages to find some small fruits, but the area soon comes under attack, forcing him to flee once more. That afternoon, rain begins to fall. Exhausted and without the strength to search for shelter, he collapses. A few hours later, he's discovered by 2 Russian soldiers who take him to their camp. There, he's greeted by Kuznetsov, the commander, who immediately instructs his men to feed and care for the boy. From that day forward, he's known by his new nickname, Sergei. The soldiers try to distract themselves from the realities of war by reminiscing about their families before heading into a new battle. However, without warning, a bomb strikes the infirmary. Sergei receives treatment from Nurse Katya. Despite his injuries, he's constantly asking questions and displaying a keen interest in learning the ways of a soldier. He gradually integrates into the unit and endears himself to everyone. Katya is summoned outside the tent by one of the soldiers and discovers a goat. Everyone is puzzled as to how the animal ended up in such a place, but they are nonetheless delighted, as it means they can enjoy milk and cheese in the coming days, a rare luxury in their current circumstances. Kuznetsov and his men return, and he immediately goes to check on Sergei, relieved to see that the boy is recovering. Sergei describes the painful injection he received, admitting that he initially wanted to run away, but his courage prevailed. He then asks to see Kuznetsov's pistol. After ensuring the weapon is unloaded, the commander allows him to hold it. Sergei inquires about the inscription on the side. Kuznetsov explains that it's a special pistol, a gift from General Ostershow. Sergei's excitement grows, and he begins to mimic firing the weapon. Kuznetsov gently takes the pistol back, explaining that he's still too young for such things. Undaunted, Sergei then reveals a drawing of a battle tank he's made on his stomach. He then asks Kuznetsov if he owns a plane. Upon learning that the commander has never owned an aircraft, Sergei draws one on the bandage wrapped around his injured arm. When Kuznetsov leaves the tent, Katya musters the courage to speak with him about Sergei. She pleads with him to let the boy stay with them, but Kuznetsov refuses, insisting that a child doesn't belong in a war zone. He says he'll take him to an orphanage later. Some soldiers visit Sergei, and he's excited to use binoculars for the first time. As they leave, Rizzo appears, and Sergei runs into his arms. Rizzo gives him a piece of candy. Like the other soldiers, Rizzo is developing a strong bond with Sergei. That night, Katia confides in her fellow nurse, admitting that she can't sleep because she's constantly thinking about Sergei. She explains that from the moment she saw him, she felt a maternal instinct. Katia reveals that while she doesn't want Sergei to be in the middle of a war, her biggest fear is that the commander will send him away, and she'll never see him again. The following morning, Igor approaches Kuznetsov, attempting to persuade him to let Sergei stay with the unit. He argues that the soldiers have grown attached to him, and seeing Sergei reminds them of what they're fighting for, the future of children. However, Kuznetsov reiterates that there's no place for a child in a war camp. He admits that he's also grown fond of the boy, but he believes he must do what's best for him. Finally, he reveals that he's already signed the papers for the orphanage, so his men should prepare themselves for Sergei's departure. A few hours later, during an enemy attack, Kuznetsov orders his men to return fire while he heads to the battlefield to assist Katia, who is busy rescuing a wounded soldier. Once the battle subsides, they return to the camp, where the director of the orphanage is waiting to take Sergei. The director waits in his car while they say their goodbyes. Katia, overcome with sadness, leaves without a word. Kuznetsov asks Sergei to sit beside him and begins to explain what will happen next. However, before he can finish, Sergei bursts into tears and embraces him, confessing that he was waiting for the commander and was afraid he wouldn't see him again. At that moment, Kuznetsov presents him with a wooden carved weapon and asks if he would like to be his son. They embrace, and Kuznetsov tears up the orphanage documents he had previously signed. Their next challenge is finding clothes that fit Sergei. The newest member of the army needs a uniform his size, so Igor gathers some old pieces of fabric for the tailor to create new clothes for the boy. Soon after, Katia appears with the smallest boots she could find. With a few adjustments from the shoemaker, they'll be perfect for Sergei. The next morning, Kuznetsov goes to Sergei's room to wake him. He tells him that like a real soldier, he'll have to get dressed in 45 seconds, then hands him his new uniform. Sergei is overjoyed and runs to get ready, but first asks why there's a sticker stuck to Kuznetsov's face. His new father explains that due to an oversight, he cut himself while shaving. To count the 45 seconds, the commander lights a match and says that Sergei must be ready before the wood burns completely. A few matchsticks later, they exit the tent, and Sergei is excited to show off his new uniform to his teammates. At that moment, a surprise attack happens, and the commander runs to protect his son. He orders one of his men to take the child to the shelter while everyone takes cover in the trenches during the bombing. Some soldiers are injured, and the boy goes to the infirmary to help take care of him. He offers them some water and is willing to help with whatever else is needed. One of the men who had his eyes bandaged asked Sergei to read him the letters sent by his family. However, the boy still could not read and begins to invent good news to give the poor soldier. Bombs kept falling outside, so to calm his comrades, Sergei offers to sing for them. Everyone gets emotional after all. That was a moment of great tension, and even so, a child was able to give relief and even hope in the hearts of those sick men. After those dark hours, Sergei takes a nap on Katia's lap. His father, the commander, arrives soon after and sits next to the woman. Kuznetsov claims he needs to tell her something, but Sergei wakes up and messes up the whole scheme. As the camp is being rebuilt, two soldiers spot Sergei shaving and decide to make fun of him, asking if the boy was getting ready for a date. However, the boy claims to be a soldier, and according to him, soldiers do not go on dates. He later introduces himself to the commander to find out what his task for the day will be. Kuznetsov questions why there was a bandage on the boy's face, and Sergei claims that as a result of an oversight, he cut himself while shaving. After hearing this, he asks his son to go get the letters from the truck that was about to arrive and distribute them to the soldiers. The men start dancing with happiness when they receive the letters from their relatives, and this makes the boy start to like his work even more. At the end of the task, Sergei decides to use his camouflage suit to sneak around the camp. As he peers through his binoculars, the boy spots a pair of boots trying to fit in a hiding place. Immediately, he runs back to the camp and calls some of his companions to go get the intruder who was hiding in the haystack. Andrei and his men go there to check what was going on and end up encountering 2 soldiers from the enemy army. After exchanging a few shots, they manage to capture those men, and Sergei returns to camp. Meanwhile, Commander Kuznetsov learns from one of his men that his son helped capture 2 spies. The man is surprised and is proud of the boy's bravery and modesty. Then Sergei appears in his room, and the man gives him great news. Kuznetsov had received permission to adopt the boy, and from that day forward, they would officially be a family. Sergei is overjoyed and calls his father to go tell the news to Katya. The boy says he saw the woman crying once when Kuznetsov was wounded in battle. The commander is disconcerted to hear that but still decides to accompany Sergei. Meanwhile, Katya is washing herself on the banks of the river when a soldier sneaks up and takes her coat. Then the man calls out to her and hands her a bouquet of flowers that he picked himself. The woman is clearly uncomfortable with the situation and tries to get her coat back. At that time, Sergei and his father appear. Kuznetsov soon identifies the situation and pulls the boy back. The commander tries to disguise while watching intently. However, Sergei manages to free himself from his arms and runs towards Katya. Then he calls out for his father, but the man, embarrassed, has already left. A few days later, during yet another battle, the boy walks through the trenches looking for Igor. After receiving the ammunition, the soldier asks the boy to go to the underground shelter. Sergei refuses to abandon his comrades, but Igor manages to convince him that this is an order, and a good soldier must follow the orders of his superiors. Still, the young man decides to help. He overhears his father and his companions talking about a failed connection, a wire had snapped, and some men were sent to fix it. Sergei decides to go after them and crawls on the ground in order to avoid getting hit. When he finds an injured soldier, he tries to help and asks what to do to fix the wire. Sergei follows the instructions for joining the 2 ends. By doing so, the connection returns, and the commander is able to call for reinforcements. This heroic act of the boy possibly saved hundreds of lives. After the battle, Sergei starts coming up with a new plan. His next mission is to bring Katya and her father together, as he has already realized that they have an interest in each other. For this, the boy runs to the nurse and says that the commander is sick. Then he takes the woman running to his room. Upon arriving there, she finds Kuznetsov lying on the table and wakes him up in despair. In the meantime, Sergei was already hiding, watching everything from the outside. As Katya tries to examine him, the commander wakes up startled and claims he is not sick. The nurse explains what happened, and in that instant, Kuznetsov understands his son's plan. He tries to gather the strength to declare himself, but the woman is extremely embarrassed and leaves. However, he couldn't let this chance pass, so he goes after her. Meanwhile, Sergei climbs a tree and uses his binoculars to observe the camp. At that time, he spots some rescue dogs arriving at the scene and runs there to receive them. A few minutes later, the boy asks permission to go for a walk with them and climbs onto a wheeled stretcher while the animals pull him. The problem begins when, on the way, the dogs spot a cat and start chasing it. If they kept running like that, they would soon hit a minefield, and the boy's life would be in danger. Realizing this, Rizzo gets on a motorcycle and races to stop the dogs, before it's too late. Seeing that Sergei was unharmed from that situation, the soldier is extremely relieved. In the forest, Kuznetsov kept trying to talk to Katya, but when he finally manages to reach her, he can't find the right words to express exactly what he wants to say. So he decides to put Sergei in the story and claims that the boy loves the woman very much. He then asks if Katya would like to become the boy's mother. However, before the nurse can respond, a soldier appears and delivers a letter to the commander. On it was a message from the high command. The next day, the army prepares to leave. A few hours later, they stop to rest at the house of some peasants. After eating, they discover that a German bomb had fallen on that house and was still there. The projectile went through the ceiling, pierced the floor, but luckily, it didn't explode. The soldiers then decide to help them get rid of that thing before any damage is done. They later continue their march, and Sergei hitches a ride with Rizzo and his father. Suddenly, the vehicle they were in explodes, and the battalion finds it has ended up in a minefield. Sergei and everyone around are bewildered by the noise. A few meters ahead, the boy finds Rizzo dead. When they finally manage to reach their destination, while his father talks to the general, Sergei asks what his next task will be. The man asks him to inspect the soldiers' uniforms, and the boy enlists the help of an officer to carry out this task. After checking all the soldiers' boots and suits, he asks the man to write down the names of all those whose uniforms are damaged. After complying with what was ordered, the boy returns to the general's office to deliver the report. During the night, Sergei and his father walk through the forest while talking about the upcoming award ceremony, the Guard Insignia, a badge given to those who risk their lives to save the country. This means, of course, that Sergei will also receive this award. While celebrating his first award, a bomb is dropped, and Kuznetsov is buried. The boy tries to get him out of there, but he doesn't have enough strength to lift the rubble. Later, after the bombing, with the help of his comrades, the commander is taken out of there and given medical care. Despite being badly injured, the man continues to recover and is soon ready to march with his companions again. The following year, in 1943, Sergei was decorated as the youngest soldier of World War II, finally receiving a Medal of Honor. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.